Test 1, 2, 3. Looks like they're working. I didn't test to see if the foyer is on.
Oh, did you catch that Marsha hasn't started recording yet?
No, it's Marsha. Should be on. Recording is not on yet. The lobby's speaker should be. Nice.
How was your vacation?
Great. It was.
Just what the doctor ordered.
Yeah, just outstanding. There were so many good comments by those who came. 93.
Were you in charge?
I was in charge. Yeah, we rented 2 motels now in Torrey.
Oh,
Completely in 4 days, 4 nights, I should say. Has its own swimming pool. Rented the town pavilion for 4 days.
Torrey's a very pleasant place.
Yeah.
We're just a couple minutes late because of the high-tech nature of streaming to the web sometimes. We want to make sure that it's going out live.
Great.
Unfortunately, we haven't figured out yet the best way to do public, the public open session across the web yet. Eventually.
What kind of viewership do you have?
It depends on what was said. Usually there's usually 3 or 4 active viewers on any given night, and then unless
My
it's something
mother's one of
controversial.
them, and my granddaughter's one of them. So we've always got 2. And then sometimes we get 1 more somewhere.
Yeah. Let's put it this way, Netflix has no competition from the city council.
So where do I go to find it? Can I get it right here?
You certainly can. Centerville City, Utah on YouTube.
You mean you haven't been watching me?
Yeah. It's only if we talk about mics.
That was the highest viewership.
Sorry, Rob.
I thought you were planning your Tuesday nights around watching me on YouTube.
It was either that or, you're competing against $5 movie.
That's true.
Although I could do this in the comfort of my own home.
In
All the popcorn I wanted.
HD streaming. Actually, the microphones pick up very well.
Oh, do they?
Yep, you can hear us whisper. So
But it's really boring because I've tried to watch it the next day and I can't.
Maybe that's what I'll do when I'm having a hard time going to sleep. Little noise in the background.
that or any Ken Burns documentary will do it.
Yeah, I think we
They're good, but the Civil War one, I just trained myself. If I hear the fiddle, I'm out. Exactly, I'm gone.
He's got his own Paul.
Is it working? All right. What are we going to do without the mayor? Well, the mayor's gone.
It was our city attorney who solved the technical problem by following directions. All right, let's go ahead. Centerville City Council is now in session. We thank you for your patience and apologize for the delay in getting started. We recently finished a work session with our honorable Davis County Commissioners. We're very glad to have them in attendance. We appreciate them joining us as we discussed a few issues of mutual concern. We'll note for the record that 4 out of the 5 council members are here. We expect Councilman Ivy to return shortly. I'll ask that you stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, after which Councilman Bill Ince will provide a prayer or a thought. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
My comment tonight is a call for us to maintain perspective in our lives and thoughts of interactions, and I have 2 things to read. The world is too big for us, too much going on, too many crimes, too much violence and excitement. Try as you will, you get behind in the race in spite of yourself. It is an incessant strain to keep pace, and still you lose ground. Science empties its discoveries on you so fast that you stagger beneath them in hopeless keep pace with who's in and who's out. Everything is high pressure. Human nature cannot endure much more. This comes from the Atlantic Journal, June 16th, 1833. As I thought about this, it was brought to my mind an incident called the Brooks-Sumner Affair, or the caning of Charles Sumner. In the United States Senate, when Representative Preston Brooks attacked Senator Charles Sumner, an abolitionist, with a walking cane in retaliation for a speech given by Sumner 2 days earlier in which he fiercely attacked slaveholders, including a relative of Brooks. The beating nearly killed Sumner, and it drew a sharply polarized response from the American public on the subject of the expansion of slavery in the United States. It has been considered symbolic of the breakdown of reasoned discourse in our country. It would be my hope that we can all maintain our perspective and recognize our responsibilities to each other. I'd like to say a quick prayer. Our Father which art in heaven, we bow our heads before thee this evening as we gather as the Centerville City Council and citizens. We're thankful, Father, for the community in which we live. We're thankful for those who serve us, especially for our law enforcement officers and first responders. We're thankful for a safe and substantially fire-free 4th of July weekend, and for the blessings of freedom in our lives. We pray that thy Spirit will be in this meeting this night, and that we will each use good judgment and say these things in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Bill, for the thought and for the prayer. A great message for all of us. We've invited our Davis County Commissioners to stay through the open session, which is next on our agenda, and it's an opportunity for any member of our community to speak to the council and about any items of municipal concern. So I'll go ahead and open the open session, invite any who would like to speak before we get to the other items on our agenda. We ask that you state your name and city of residence for the record, as that helps us with our minutes.
Cammie Layton, 26 West, 700 South. I would like to talk about perspective. That is a very good word. We have been fair and we have been patient with the rezoning in our community. And I just heard today, which more people would be here if we had all known. This would be packed, about the rezoning that wants to take place on some property in South Centerville again. We just had 2 city newsletters that came, And one of them from Paul said, as our community has grown, I'm on the wrong one. In addition to besides new park improvements and infrastructure, growth brings other challenges. Open plots in the Centerville Cemetery have sold out. So if we want to change some of the zoning to medium density or high density, how can we be fair to the people who have lived here for years and years? We have an invitation to bring more people in, but we don't have an invitation to bury them. There's no room to bury our people that have been here for years. But we want to invite more people into our community. And so I'm just here today because I heard about the zoning desire to change in South Centerville again. And I don't want to stay for this next session, so I am hoping that somewhere, with all of the patience that we have shown and everything that we've gone through in the past 10 or 12 years, that our city council would come to a conclusion that we've had enough of all of this in our city. I have a daughter that just sold her house in Centerville last week, and she does not want to live in Centerville. One of the reasons is because we're so busy. The other reason is because of how the people have been acting, and she's tired of that. And I've heard other people say that they want to move, and I think that's sad that we're losing people that have been here for years. This is not an attack on people. It is about housing styles. We've had enough in our community. We don't have to do that anymore. So I'm asking our city council to come up with something that will be long-lasting in our plan or whatever it takes, and we pay a wonderful attorney who has the words and can come up with the words, and if not, then hire somebody who's an expert in that to come up with something to make sure that our zoning doesn't have anything higher than regular agriculture business or regular, what do you call it? Yeah, just the lowest density possible, residential for residential. I am done with medium density or high density except for businesses. We've had it, we've fought it, and I think we've had our fair share in our south, and I hope that we would protect the north too. One of the issues is our taxes are going up. I know that we have to replace things, but when you add more people, you add more burdens to our streets, you add more burden to the police force, you add more burden to our fire district, and so we're paying more money now. And you cannot use that, oh, more people will add more property taxes. Our incoming from them is not enough for our outgoing. Our outgoing is higher. We need more business attention in Centerville. That will produce a little more of our taxes, but our burden with our people is outnumbering what we have coming in from our businesses. And that's how I feel. And it's not an attack on people in general. We just have enough. We have enough land in America, enough land in Utah, where we have got to start thinking differently. We need to spread out. We can add schools and we need to have businesses come into some of these other areas, and if you get businesses, then you can add the schools and the supermarkets, and these towns will grow. But we don't want to be like a can of sardines in Centerville. It's ruining us. It has ruined us. We are not the same anymore. And that's all I have to say. So I'm hoping that you will fight against medium density and high density in our city. And that's my vote, is either agriculture or business. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimmy. Anyone else would like to speak?
No issues for the county
Our
commissioners?
commissioners are here.
Brett Milburn, 264 East London Road, Centerville. I'm going to speak as a resident of this fine city, and just want to express my appreciation to you, both elected and staff here in the city, for the fine work that you do and the service that you render on behalf of the citizens of Centerville and even beyond. I know I had the opportunity in my official capacity as commissioner to interact with many of you and the mayor particularly on a regular basis, but I just want to express my appreciation to you for your service. And I know the decisions that you face are not always easy. There are a lot of sides to every issue, and you have a tremendous amount of responsibility on your shoulders to look at all issues and try to make the best decision, not only for today, but for future generations. And just once again, applaud you and say thank you.
Thank you for that. Anyone else who would like to speak? Seeing none, we'll move on with the other items on our agenda. And, you're welcome to stay. We've got lots of exciting things. We're going to talk, we got some public hearings, but we also appreciate that you have busy schedules and places you need to be. So thank you for your time and attention and the partnership that you've shown Centerville. Next on our agenda, I believe, are the minutes review. We have one set of minutes from July 5th. Anyone have any changes or modifications to that set of minutes?
I move that we approve July 5th, 2017 City Council minutes.
Second.
So moved and secondly, approve the July 5th City Council meeting minutes. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Next, we have a summary action calendar. Commence the warranty period for the Maverick site plan, effective today, July 18th, and second, to award a bid to MC Green for $29,000 for labor, and Mountain Land Supply for $11,000, and some additional for materials for the Chateaus-Johnson amended subdivision water line. Any questions on that? If not, I'd look for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
So moved and secondly, approve the items on the summary action calendar. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Steve, next up for you, Marcus, a financial report for the year end. And,
Thank you. I'll lead out briefly, and then Marcus can take the main part of the show. We're doing it. Normally we present the financial report on a monthly basis later in the meeting, but Marcus needs to be somewhere else tonight as soon as he leaves here, so we did put it up early on. This is the financial report for the 12-month period ending June 30. It's not quite the final report because there's what we call a 13th month when we account for revenues that we don't actually receive until after June 30, and also accounts payable that come in after June 30 but apply to the fiscal year of concern. Now, unfortunately, the performance of our revenues is even worse than I had expected 3 months ago when I prepared the proposed budget and updated the estimates for the current year for this past year. And I can speak, I'm talking about the general fund particularly. You know, the other funds actually are doing pretty good, and Marcus is going to address all of those in a summary fashion. And I have attached today another summary page for the general fund that I've marked up, and I can speak to that after Marcus is through with his remarks. But I'd like Marcus to go first and share whatever he'd like to, and you can ask him questions about anything and everything.
Great. And are you able to put up the
Yes.
financial report
Yes.
that he's speaking to?
Yep.
For the public. Thank you.
So yeah, if we just go to page 1 of that report. this is tracking of the cash by fund.
Marcus, can you go up just a couple more decibels in your voice? Even with the mic, I can't hear you down on this end.
Okay.
Doesn't seem like that mic's working.
That's a little better.
That's a little better.
And so we've been tracking the cash by fund and also the restricted cash. That's important to know that, you know, your regular cash needs to be able to cover the restrictions that we have on cash. And I'm happy to report as of year end, our unrestricted cash fully covers the restrictions that we have on cash. I mean, most of it's in that general fund where there's about $900,000 of restricted cash, and we have over $1 million of cash in that fund. There's also been loans from one fund to another fund. That's down to just one fund where the sanitation fund owes the drainage fund just over $48,000. And so we'll continue to track this so we know, I mean, how much unrestricted cash the city has to make sure that regular cash is covering those restrictions. And so the cash is looking good. If we go to the next page, this is a summary of the general fund. And I mean, like Steve said, the year is over as of June 30th. However, it takes a month or two to get all the invoices in, and so we'll still have some accounts payable that we're gonna have to code to the expense line items for those expenses that incurred during the fiscal year. On the other side, there's revenues that we'll continue to get in July and August that relate to the whole year. We have recorded receivables to estimate those amounts, but we'll true those up over the next month or 6 weeks.
I think the key thing to note here is that our tax revenues are down significantly below projections, sales tax, franchise taxes.
Yeah, this markup page that I'll show you in a bit here will show you some of that.
Right, and so, yeah, the general fund revenue, we're at 91%. Part of that, though, there was 165,000 recorded as revenue, as property tax revenue, and it's also recorded in the expenditure, but really we were just able to record that right to the RDA fund. And so if you eliminate that 165, we're closer to 93% instead of the 91%. Also another part that affected that was in the original budget we had planned to have the cemetery perpetual care money in the general fund, but we transferred close to 50,000 during the year into that perpetual care fund, and so that's part of the reason we're lower than we should be on the revenue side. The major thing though is sales tax. It's just seemed to be budgeted too high for this fiscal year.
Yeah. Marcus, I've marked a number of those revenue items that will show up on that general fund page when I bring it up. Okay.
Okay. And as far on the expense side, I mean, we're under expenses. I mean, we're around 94%. But it's just when the revenues don't come in, I mean, it leaves us right now, we're at a net loss of about $330,000 for the year. What that does to our general fund balance, I mean, we're still in compliance with the state law. We need that general fund balance to be at 5%, and we're probably about 5.6 or 7. I mean, it's so we're above that, but we're close. So our reserves are they're okay. They're within state law, but probably should be a little bit higher. Is there any questions about the general fund, or do we want to get into any more detail?
Well, it might help if I put that other page up on the general fund, but maybe we have him go ahead with the other funds and then come back.
I did have one question about the transfer into the perpetual care that became restricted cash after the transfer.
I mean, only 37,000 is permanently restricted. So the other amount, about the 50,000 that we came in this year and was transferred over there, it's restricted that it has to be spent on maintenance of the cemetery. So there was maintenance expense during the year of well over the 50,000. So that could be
that's an option.
Spent, but I think the council wanted to try to build up that fund. But yeah, we could designate money to spend that, and it would be proper if we wanted to do that.
I'm recommending we have a work session on August 1st prior to your meeting that night, where we will talk about the new budget before you actually adopt it, within a week or two after that, and amendments to that tentative budget. And if you want to discuss anything that might affect the closeout of this past fiscal year, we could do that as well that night, and I think it would be timely enough before you have to close the books, right, Marcus?
Yeah.
So keep that in mind.
I think, I think that's great, and I understand the $37,000 transfer. I think the remaining of the transfer, we should be limiting it to approximately half of the net cash flow coming in, which would not do a lot to change things, but that's
Should I put that on a
list?
list for discussion on August 1st?
I'd appreciate it.
Yes, because I have the
Okay.
same issues with spend down, because there should be something to offset the maintenance, but not in this forum necessarily to talk about it.
If we want to go down to the next page, and there's the RDA fund. Overall, the revenue is about 95%. I don't know the exact detail we want to go into, but the property tax revenue is quite low. The thing that brought us up to the 95% was that UDOT reimbursement. And so
Well, and I'll remind the council that it was estimated high intentionally in case tax increment came in higher than was.
Because if we don't estimate high and it's low, then we're,
Well, that's what we thought. I've gotten some different kind of direction from the county that maybe that's not the case, but I think in the new budget, I did put some extra in, so just in case, yeah.
And also, that reminds me, back on the general fund, that in the fiscal 17-18 budget, the revenue's a lot more in line, the budget's a lot more in line with what I think is going to actually happen.
Realistic revenues,
Yeah,
yes.
And so in the RDA, I mean, it's okay overall. We're under budget on the expenditure side. The recreation fund, it's way over on the revenue, slightly over on the expense side. The revenue for June was quite a bit of activity.
Yeah, but I think we should remind you that the reason revenues exceed expenditures is because you have an annual transfer from the general fund into the recreation fund to provide some subsidization.
Right,
And-
there was 41,000.
And that's another issue you could revisit at some point if you like.
We're over about 33,000 on the revenue side compared to budget. The RAP tax, there wasn't a whole lot of activity in the RAP. I mean, money came in, but we didn't spend a whole lot of the RAP tax funds this year. And then the cemetery perpetual care fund was, it's year to date about 46,000 came in, plus that 37,000 of transfers, and there's no expenses in that fund. Next page would be the debt service fund. I mean, it's just money coming into the fund, and then it's paid out to pay the debt payment for the art center. Storm drain, this fund was combined in with the drainage enterprise fund, because those two should be I mean, it's all part of the enterprise, and so it shouldn't be two separate funds. And so that money, those funds were just transferred over to the enterprise fund. And then we've got the parks, capital project fund, where most of the expenses there were for the phase 2, the addition on the park. We're under budget.
Right, and this is where we are drawing first for the park expansion, and then we'll draw from the RAP tax fund, because this fund is the impact fees that we want to use first.
so that they're no longer restricted,
Well, because they can be used only for
only for park.
eligible projects, yeah.
You want to use impact fee money first because it expires after transportation fund, these are the Class C money, the Prop 1 money, some sales tax money.
Yep.
And those are mostly spent on slurry seal projects.
Well, various street projects. And I think, Marcus, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we do expect one more distribution of the gasoline tax into this fund. There's 6 distributions during the year, but the last one comes after the close of the fiscal year.
It comes in August, normally.
So we'll be doing well in this fund here.
Now, the next
Compared to budget, I should say.
The next page, we have the Utopia fund, that the money just comes in and it's a pledge payment to Utopia, so not a whole lot of activity in there. Then we get into our enterprise funds. The water fund, I mean, did great. It's right at, it's 101% on the revenue side, so right about what was budgeted. The expense side at 93%, so things are looking good in the water fund. Sanitation fund, same thing, right at 101% and 99% on the expenditure. Drainage utility, all these enterprise funds are looking good. They're right with budget. The expenditures are not way under, not way over, so I feel pretty good where we're at on those enterprise funds. Then we go to the next page, the telecom fund, and I mean, this is just money coming in and goes out to the UIA for the payment. They're both at 97%. And then there's the Whitaker Trust Fund, and I mean, it's doing fine. I mean, it's 72% of the revenue and 69% of the expenditure side.
The reason that revenue number is so low is because there was in the adopted budget assumptions about donations and grants that weren't realized fully. And then there is still one transfer to occur from the general fund of $6,500.
So, yeah, any questions, or do we want to go into?
I think we ought to put up that general fund one.
Okay.
And for the benefit of the audience, both here and on YouTube, I mean, this appears to be pretty cursory that as we've gone through this, but this city council has spent many, many hours over the last 3 months, particularly becoming very well acquainted with our financial situation, with our various funds, and the adjustments that have been made and so forth. And I just don't want the impression to be that this is just be given lip service. They have spent a lot of time on it, and I commend them for that.
As you're pulling that up, I think the biggest question for me right now is this just this lower than projected revenue a Centerville City issue because people are shopping more in other areas and lower energy costs and shopping online, or is this a wider trend among municipalities in our area?
I just, on the sales tax, I think we're way over budget.
We overestimated. We were overly optimistic on that. I think for the last 2 years, for example, we used an assumption of 6%, and it was really more like 4%. And
3 or less.
Yeah.
We're higher than we were last year. It's not like we're really bad, just the budget was too high.
So.
I mean, things like court revenue, that I've seen trends in that going down all over. I mean, here it's been kind of low on the business building permits, and that's been kind of a low year for that.
Well, and I've got that up there now, Marcus, so maybe I'll jump in and explain some of these. You can see the taking out the 165,000 in revenue reduces this number here and reduces this number here and makes it 93% instead of 91%. Oh, I was going to, by the way, I've got a hard copy for you of this one. And you can make some notes on this if you'd like. Marcia, again, one of those to Marcus if he wants it. And then up here, I've just picked out, I've asterisked down here the significant shortfalls from the estimates, the budgeted estimates. For example, the property tax line, this is the delinquent line, and I don't know quite honestly why we estimated 85,000 in delinquent, because the 2 prior years, which I've written next to it there, were much less than that. I don't know what the basis, I have to admit, was for the 85,000.
Well, at that county meeting, they did say that they were setting up a system and increasing their collections by a lot. So it might have been based on.
We haven't seen the impact of that, though, yet, unfortunately, if that's the case. The sales tax, I've actually copied on the back of that I handed out to you, the sales tax data month by month, and done a little math there for you to show you if you apply certain assumptions, how that increases from year to year, and if you don't make that, what the shortfall is. Continuing with these asterisks, we've got the franchise for power. You can see that in fiscal year 15, the column that I've written in there on the left side, the power franchise was almost 600,000. A little bigger? Like that? How's that?
A little better.
Okay. So I'm talking about this number right here.
So power was flat, natural gas and cable TV were down, but everything else was generally small growth.
Right. Now, from 3 months ago, the significant changes from the estimates that I made 3 months ago that are in the new budget would include this licenses and permits line. This number right here, 282,000 for the year-to-date actual, is about, as you can see, 80,000 less than the budgeted estimate. But 3 months ago, I was still optimistic that we were going to hit that 360,000 or come close to it. But we just haven't seen much come through in 3 months in terms of building permits. Hopefully that'll change over the next year, but whether it's commercial or residential. But you can see the number in the fiscal year 16 column last year, or now I say last year, 2 years back now, 526,000 in that category. And we knew we weren't going to do that well, but we unfortunately didn't even meet the estimate that we did put in the budget. And then the other one that is down even further from what I estimated 3 months ago is the court fines. I estimated at that time the 12-month estimate would be 475,000, and you can see that it's only 439,000. So it's further reduction. Anyway, so that's the revenue side, and on the expenditure side, we are a few percentage points below the budget in total, so that was good, but just not enough to, we've still got that deficit, if you will. So we will, when we meet on August 1st, assuming you agree to a work session on August 1st, we will, between now and then, Jake and I and Marcus, we will be reviewing the numbers in that tentative budget for this new year, based on this history, seeing if there's much to tweak. I don't think there'll be a lot of tweaks because of this, because we did bring the numbers down quite a bit. Any questions you want to ask now, or you want to save them for the work session?
I think the only thing I'd like to see when we get to the work session is just if we can cast a net for sales tax projections in the county, just to see what that trend is. I don't think it's reasonable to anticipate a year-over-year growth in the 6% range.
No.
I think you're looking realistically 2%, 3% would be just a banner year. Anything above that, and I think we're going to be in trouble. So I'd like to see what the trend is around the county, just to help us with dialing that in.
Okay. Yeah, we have been around 4% the last 2 years, but yeah, I agree, 6% was too aggressive, clearly.
Thank you for this information. It's helpful.
Controlling for new commercial growth, of course.
Right, depending on that. Commercial growth does also help on the franchise revenue side with the tax that is applied to electricity, natural gas. But I think they've held those prices down for power and natural gas, maybe even decreased a little bit in some ways. And then it depends on the weather as well for the year.
If there aren't any questions, we'll allow Marcus to get to his next obligation, and thank you for coming and reporting on this. Next up, we have a public hearing on a zone map amendment for 640 West Porter Lane. We'll start this with a staff report from our Community Development Director, Corey, to give us some background on this.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Let me get there. We'll get out of here.
I don't think it is. I think it's dead.
I think, yeah.
Got unplugged?
You want the staff report, Corey?
The map that's associated with it, so you can go to the staff report, or you can go, yeah, something
Right
of that nature. The city received a petition from Mr. James Graham. He is interested in purchasing this property from Mr. Dave Bell. The property is located on Porter, and it's essentially a long parcel sitting back behind Dave's Auto, the Les Schwab area, off of Porter Lane. As you can see on the map, it's the long green. It's currently agricultural low is the zoning. To the right on the map, or to the east, is the Brighton Homes project that you're probably pretty familiar with. The request is a portion of that long green, substantially a portion of it. There's a small home out front on the road that's not a part of the property, that's separated. And so you actually have the commercial on the corner, you have the brown brick house, and then the white house. That is not part of the request. The brown house is the residential medium, the smaller zoning there. The small white house is also in the agricultural low, but it's substantially that large property. They'd like to rezone it to residential medium as required. This is submitted to the Planning Commission for their recommendation. They did debate it, looked at the neighborhood plan for the area, which does look at RL and RM as buffers to this area. So either of those zones are appropriate. As they concluded with the Brighton at an RM on the east side, they felt that the request for residential medium was consistent with the pattern as well as the buffer requirements in the neighborhood plan. They did raise a small concern. You have that house there that remains in the agricultural low, and what would happen to the future. And as I think in a previous council meeting, we talked about that we receive petitions by property owners and evaluate them on their merits, but if we see that it has a change in pattern, we can also initiate our own zone amendments. The difference is the property owner is petitioning, so they obviously want the request. If the city initiates it, we have to notify them, specifically that property owner, to let them know that the city is considering a change and allow them to participate in the process too. So that was described to them. I think in the long haul, they would like to see the AL be removed if this moves forward, because they don't see the value of it, but that would either later by a property owner or city initiation petition to do that. But all in all, they recommended the residential medium as requested by the petition.
Thank you very much. This is scheduled for a public hearing, but before we do, we want to give you a chance to ask questions. Are there any questions of staff before we invite the applicant, if the applicant is here to speak? Any questions for Corey? If not, we'll invite the applicant if they'd like to say anything before the public hearing.
Hello, I'm James Graham with JAG Associates. You know, first of all, I just, you know, I think this project obviously follows the general plan and the future of what your city is trying to do. I think currently, the way it's got agricultural on it, it obviously is an island. So no matter how you look at it, it's not really a conforming use on the future of your city. I did hear a citizen speak about, you know, not having RM and, you know, dense projects, and I totally understand that. But, you know, you guys do have a general plan to follow, and which is obviously, you know, it's a good thing to put those projects in the right spot. And this one kind of obviously is just, in other words, our zoning is going to be the same zoning as all the neighboring properties or less, which is, you know, RM and commercial that surrounds this property. So it, you know, if the zoning didn't go to that, it really would be creating some type of island regardless in the future, because it's pretty much needs to be an RM property since it's surrounded by that or commercial. So the other thing is, you know, we want to do a design that allows baby boomers and, you know, their millennials and children to literally live in some of those units, because right now, you know, there's a huge demand, and it's not just for housing, but it's, you know, you've got parents and children that want to live together, you've got millennials that want to move closer to their parents, and, you know, Centerville City is just compacted into this small area width-wise, and, you know, this is just one thing that, you know, I can kind of design and implement into this project to help these people out. And there's a lot of people that are, you know, need this where it's at. And the demand's definitely there. And seeing there's one of the concepts, which is, you know, doing a Mediterranean modern type design. We're looking at possibly doing an end unit with the master on the main level, so that, you know, we can work with, you know, some of the baby boomers and stuff like that. But right now it's 2 acres. We want to do 16 units, which is what it would come out to be, which is less units than's next door, but it's the same zoning, so it's pretty much conforming to that. But that's basically what I want to say. So,
thank you very much. Any questions for the applicant before we open the public hearing? Seeing none, well, thank you very much. And at this point, I'll go ahead and, if there aren't any further questions for staff or the applicant, I'll open the public hearing and invite any who would like to come and speak about this project or about the zoning, recommended zoning change.
I'm back. Dean Williams, 130 West, 550 South, just below the junior high. And I'm really surprised that I'm here because we talked about Brighton Homes before, and I made a presentation to you then and to the Planning Commission. And then we talked about the Bolling Engineering property. And I thought that we had discussed and finalized that we weren't going to do any more of these. There are 2 parts to communication. One is the sender and one's the receiver. And as a receiver, maybe I misunderstood what was going on. Now, I appreciate the fact that they want to make as much money as they can off this, but I've lived in Centerville my whole life, and I have seen the changes that have occurred in South Centerville. Now, for some reason, North Centerville is a holy cow, and it's protected up there. And we get all of the multifamily and all of the high density in South Centerville. And it's really discouraging to see that happen. And I didn't like to see Brighton Homes come in with what they did on Porter Lane, but it's a pretty development and it's there and there's nothing I can do about it now. But to rezone this, and then after what we decided with Bolling Engineering, and then cascading into Dick's Market, we talked about this before, where's it going to end? And is it a slippery slope where we're just going to slide in? Well, we did it with them, we did it with Brighton, Now let's do it with these guys. And well, we did it with these guys. Let's go a little farther. They're doing it in Bountiful now with Brighton on Pages Lane. And I thought that we had a master plan for the south part of Centerville, where we were going to change the zoning so that we didn't get into the RM. There was going to be a lesser one where we can get into the R4 or into the R5 and not go any higher. And maybe I misunderstood that with the last council meeting when we talked about Balling Engineering. But to me, it's not acceptable to put more multifamily dwellings in the south end of Centerville. We don't have the room for it. It's an impact on everything, and we're just headed the wrong way. And 2 of my kids live in Centerville, and one lives in Eagle Mountain and one lives in Far West. And I would love for them to be in Centerville, but they weren't looking for a home because I was here. So to say that people want to live by their parents, no, I don't buy that argument. But I know you guys have a tough decision to make on these types of things, but at some point we have to decide what's the vision for Centerville and what's the goal. And if you want to live in high density and high density housing, move to Farmington. Go out in Station Park, and it's killing them out there. And I don't want that in Centerville. And I don't think, as a landowner who's been here my entire life, I think I have just as many rights as anybody else. So I disagree with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. I did want to clarify one thing. The city does not go out and necessarily seek applicants. In our state, we have private property, and any owner of a private property can bring a project at any time. It's our responsibility to respond to that whenever an application is brought. So it's not necessarily the city going out and seeking. It's private property owners with rights who have a right to develop their property or a petition for a change in development, and that's how these things come to the city.
Dale McIntyre, I live here in Centerville. I've looked through the general plan a couple of times, and it seemed to me that there's a place in there where it talked about the desire of the citizens of Centerville to have residential low zoning. I'm pretty sure that was in there. I go home and read it again. I remember when the Ballin project was underway, I came and I spoke. I don't remember if it was to the city council or if it was to the zoning commission, but I made the comment at that time, if you raise the zoning density for this piece of property, won't that be used as a reason for raising the zoning density across the street for residential when it is obviously going to have to go that way sometime? And I was assured, no, we wouldn't use that as the excuse for raising zoning there. And then in the same meeting, they made reference to the fact that the property to the east was residential high, therefore this would make a good buffer. That's not using the zoning next door to be a reason for raising the zoning here. You bet it is. I wish that it was someone more than just the people of Centerville who could read the general plan and see that the people of Centerville want residential low zoning. That doesn't seem to be getting through to everyone. Earlier in the meeting, Commissioners Meekum and McEwen were speaking about the number of people who watch this meeting. And I think they were talking about 3 and 4. Could I suggest that if you didn't take in from that light fixture over there to this light fixture back here, all of these supporting structures up here and that light fixture back there as the main focus, and if the city council were positioned higher than the center of the screen, there's a good chance that people would pay more attention to what's going on here.
Mayor, I think this will work now.
They got it plugged back in?
Yeah.
You're welcome to.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
You're welcome to come to this side. We've got a better mic guard on this side than that side. That one's obviously the wind guard is not on and functioning.
My name is Laura Dudley. I'm a 21-year homeowner in Centerville, and 12 of the last in Shayla Park, which is directly affected by this new proposed development. Our quiet little corner of Centerville is not so quiet anymore, and it is not going to recover. Roads have been torn up and patched again and again, and we've been detoured, making it difficult to get home. I have a question. Who is going to put our road back into its original state? We had a major divot in our road in December, causing damage to our vehicles. And from work with the utility lines going into the new Brighton development, we have incurred water pressure damages and costs in the form of paying for plumbers, parts, and inconveniences. Are we as homeowners responsible for these costs? Yes, I've got the plumber's bill and the repairman bill to prove. This new community that Brighton is putting in is already a parking eyesore because of poor planning. Apparently, pickup trucks were never accounted for. They overhang the driveways, spilling into the narrow lane. And Shayla Park has been forced to send flyers to inform our new neighbors of our liability concerns from their use of our private park and playground. Overcrowding an area raises the number of traffic violators, making the streets much less safe, and I have personally been victimized. A week ago Monday, I was running east on Porter Lane, and a car comes barreling out of that development. I'm halfway across the street. I saw them out of the peripheral of my eye, and I'm waving, here I am. They scream around, go sailing up Porter Lane, and yell at me that I have to stop. Where? In the middle of the road so that they can hit me? Great. So our quiet little corner of Centerville is not so quiet anymore, and it will not recover. Please don't make it worse by allowing the maximum number of units in an already overcrowded area. Yes, both developments are zoned for residential medium, but take a drive around Shayla Park and take a drive around the Brighton Porter Walton townhomes. Shayla Park is on the lower end of that medium density, whereas the Porter Walton townhomes is pushing the maximum of the medium density units. So I would like to ask for a clarification and maybe even a change in what that medium density is defined as. So you can count on the developer to insist and even demand for those maximum number of units for their profit. And it's basically in the name of greed. And greed does not take into consideration the people that have lived there and people that are in the surrounding areas. And the developer could care less. They just want to, get their money. So I would ask that you would please consider clarifying that medium density. And please take a drive around Shayla Park and take a drive around the Porter Walton townhomes. And realize that the people from the Porter Walton are coming over and using Shayla Park. Now I've got a letter that I would like to read from another Centerville resident. Her name is Marty Money. She lives at 938 North, 500 West. July 28, 2017. Dear members of the Centerville City Council, thank you for your work on the council. It is respected and appreciated. Please accept this letter as public comment regarding the proposed zoning map amendment at 640 West Porter Lane. Please know that with all due respect to the work of city staff and the Planning Commission, this zoning amendment is a mistake. It continues the lopsided, highly dense development of South Centerville. it disproportionately affects the neighborhoods around Porter Lane. With the Porter Walton townhomes nearly complete, that project should be the bookend to this housing type on Porter Lane, rather than turning the page for another multi-unit development. The reason for my lack of support is the same as has been explained to this council at the kind invitation of council members Meekum and Ince last fall. It negatively affects the quality of life in our community. Because a developer asks for a change does not obligate this body to grant it when it negatively affects the quality of life of our city's residents. Time will be the greatest indicator of how this area is being overbuilt as a revolving door neighborhood. But now is the time to do something about it. The proposed project will undoubtedly be riddled with the same problems we see at Porter Walton Townhomes. Too many homes on too narrow streets, not enough parking, lack of sidewalks, lack of usable green space, access that inhibits fire safety and emergency responders. There are no red curbs painted or posted signs about parking restrictions in the development. Cars are often parked on those streets. The water pressure in the nearby neighborhood has decreased. These issues should sound very familiar. I again beg the council to address these issues at an ordinance level. Change the laws, and you will change how developers can negatively affect our community. Porter Lane already has its fair share of medium-density housing. Please vote no to this project and zone Centerville right. Thank you. Signed, Marty Money.
Thank you very much for that comment.
Thank you, Council. Oh, sorry. My name's Heather Strasser. I live at 434 South 600 West. I'm Laura's neighbor. Thanks for the work you do on behalf of the citizens of Centerville. If you may recall, Marty Money and I gave a presentation to the City Council in November of 2016. Our thoughts and opinions have not changed, and they're applicable to the issue that's before you tonight. The general plan states, the citizens of Centerville desire to achieve a quality of life that is consistent with the development of low-density residential development. If the zoning is changed on this parcel from agriculture low to medium residential, our quality of life will not be consistent with the development of low-density residential development. We already have 46 units being built on 6 acres of land right next door. We have Shayla Park across the street with 32 units on 6 acres. The area is dense enough. Why does all the density have to be in South Centerville? Over time, an area with too much density will become blighted. As a resident of the Shayla Park neighborhood, I work to keep my neighborhood family friendly. The Porter Walton development is nearly finished. I hope you have or will take the time to walk around the development. There are no red curbs or posted signs about street parking restrictions in the development. I hope that's yet to come. Cars are often parked on those streets. Cars that are parked on their driveways hang into the street oftentimes. There's just not enough room for that many people in that space. The water pressure in my neighborhood's irrigation system has decreased since the development has started being built. And the people that have moved in are wonderful. They're great additions to Centerville. We have enough residents that access Porter Lane right now. Adding another medium residential development will impact our quality of life. Our ordinances need to be strengthened to reflect the statements of the general plan. 8 units per acre for medium density is too much. 8 units per acre for this parcel is too much. The City Council cannot base its decision on what the builder is suggesting he will build. We've been down that road before. Once the zoning is changed, the city is bound by the ordinances. Do not change the zoning unless our ordinances are sufficient to support a maximum of 6 units per acre on medium residential. The applicant stated in his presentation to the Planning Commission that there is demand for this type of housing. Commissioner Hershey indicated there is demand for housing in Centerville. I agree. People want to live in Centerville. Let's keep our zoning in check to maintain the quality of life we all appreciate as residents of Centerville. Thank you for the work you do here in Centerville to keep it family friendly.
Thank you, Heather. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and turn it to the council for debate or further questions and action on this.
Have we had any reports from Public Works on what the water pressure is in that zone with the addition?
Yeah, this is the first I had heard of it. It sounds like maybe we can get some clarification whether it was irrigation water pressure or city water pressure.
As far as the irrigation water pressure goes, my neighborhood just east of this has had the same problem, and I've talked to Dual Creek, and they've had major breaks in supply lines.
Dual Creek is having significant issues all over the place.
Yeah.
But I was unaware of any city water pressure
Not
issues.
that I'm aware of.
So would you look into that with Mike and Randy?
Mm-hmm.
I kind of have to agree with what we heard. I would like more options in our zoning. I would actually like to direct our staff to come back. I don't feel like I can rezone this at this time because we do have 8, and I think that's too high. I agree with some of the things that they've said about it's just too many on that piece of property. So I would like an option instead of saying, no, you can't have anything, to give them 5 or to give them 6. So if any of the other commissioners would like to, I would like to direct staff to look to maybe giving us some more options in our zoning so that we have options for 5 or options for 6, that we don't have to allow 8. I think at the time 8 went in, it was conditional use, and conditional use at that time was way more in the favor of the city. The state has changed now to where conditional use really doesn't give us any options but giving it to them.
I thought we had discussed, and Corey, maybe your memory is different, we talked about adding granularity, like an R2, R3, R4 type. Where did we end up on that, or does that come before the Planning Commission for additional discussion?
As I recall, you ended up with, we'll address that later that night.
It looks like now's later, right?
Yeah,
And if I could just respond to the suggestion. So you, as the legislative body, do have the authority to amend your zoning code as well as your general plan and to revisit those policies. But when an applicant has filed an application, they have a right to pursue that application in accordance with the ordinances that are in place at the time they file the application. So I think it's my advice that you need to review this application in accordance with your existing general plan policies.
I think the intent is to, we were talking about future projects as far as that goes.
So I agree with you, but my problem is with the options we have, I can't support it.
So, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Tammy.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I do have a major concern with if there's a water pressure issue in the area, if that's not mitigatable, that is a significant impact. I'd like to know more about that before actually doing any rezone. I'd like to hear from Randy on that, because that would be a major issue going forward, because we've already heard from residents about streets being torn up for the purposes of construction. I'd really hate to need to go in there and put in larger water lines and other things after the fact, because we don't have adequate pressure.
Those are all valid points. I'd like to speak to the fact that the decision before us tonight is more of a bigger picture decision. Those are administrative and staff-related issues that we can address, and I'm sure we can solve. We're very good at solving problems. To the bigger picture level of this, that is the general plan, which always is very general. But there are extraordinarily legitimate reasons that the general plan says that this area could be appropriate as RL or RM. And these are things I've said many times before, but I'll just restate for the record some of those very legitimate reasons. One of the most important principles in land use planning is buffering. And we've heard tonight that some people are concerned that if you change one thing to RM, then that's an excuse to say you're buffering the next thing and the next thing. But in reality, the buffer that we're dealing with here is the commercial very high, which is in the area. So this is an area that is right next to a frontage road and has commercial very high. And from my planner's perspective, it's irresponsible to not take that buffering question heavily into account in situations like this. I do hear often from my South Centerville residents. I care about South Centerville as passionately as anyone else. I live here. I built here very intentionally. I do hear very often that the concern is that we take a heavier load. And part of the reason, if that's true, is that we're buffering against commercial. So one of the things that I point out, and one of the aspects of the reason I chose very intentionally to build over here, is that we also have the benefit, there's a cost to that. There's a cost to living closer to the commercial core of your city. But we also have the benefit of the convenience of that. And I don't think you can get the benefit of living closer to the commercial without also acknowledging the realities that come with good planning. And that is to put buffers into place, to scale down your land uses and have not two contradictory land uses right next to each other. So regardless of whether or not the Brighton Homes project had already gone in this area, all the same reasons that city council unanimously decided to rezone that AL area to RM at that time are still in place. Nothing has changed. And so even if everything else around here was still AL, even if Shalea Park didn't exist, the same reasoning would be in place. The other thing that I want to say is that honestly, this is a market issue and a property rights issue as well. And I've said this oftentimes, but I often feel like the most conservative person speaking at this platform on these issues, and for a couple of reasons. One is fiscal conservatism. If we want to actually say we want to keep a weed overgrown, legally and criminally problematic, dilapidated property in place of something else, and we do the math as far as the fiscal advantage for our city, that's very hard to justify if you claim to be yourself a fiscal conservative. Politically conservative, are we truly politically conservative? Are we respecting what the market is saying to us? It's legitimate for property owners and developers and people who are trying to sell land to tell us that this is marketable. And that just means that there's other citizens in our area who have that kind of need. And then the one last thing I wanted to say to Cammie's comment about that we just need to spread out more. One of the most essential things in planning is recognizing the extraordinarily high cost of that spreading out more. And so we have lots of fiscal challenges as a city. We have fiscal challenges as a region and as a state. And the more we encourage that spreading out for the sake of preserving strange pockets of land that aren't compatible with what's around them, then the more we're costing our area millions and even billions of dollars in needed infrastructure for that spreading out.
My other thing, though, is you're saying that because one has it, the next one should. Well, looks to me like the council should not have approved that. It's right in the middle of two agricultural pieces, and then we put residential medium. So we created that. And we are.
You were on
No, I did not. I did not create that. And but that was created, and so to me,
Stephanie, you voted on that.
I did, and it wasn't for residential at the time. That was a bait and switch, and I'm
well. Lisa and I, in that
so.
meeting, very, very strongly reminded the council that we're making a zoning decision and should not consider the specific use.
It's an unfortunate learning thing that I look back on with a great deal of regret and resentment, actually. I agree that there are points to be given for buffering, but I don't think buffering for the sake of buffering to the detriment of the people who are already there is a good idea. I think what we've got in the general plan is a problem. We've addressed several times that we want to change it, and we always come up with more urgent crises that need to be dealt with first. So I think this is the next urgent crisis, and I am not comfortable with voting for more there. The water pressure being one of the problems, the difficulties with the road being another. I'm not comfortable with it at this time.
So Tammy, I just want to address the market forces issue. I believe that there's definitely a balance that needs to be taken there, especially with market forces, because if you look at market, it's maximum dollar per acre is what you're looking for as a developer, as a landowner, and that isn't necessarily compatible with the community as a whole. And I'll point out Sugar House, 24 South area. Market dictated what happened there, and that is a very, very unfortunate development. I used to really like going to Sugar House. It was a good place to shop. It was very walkable in terms of some of the shops. But if you look at what's happened, Sugar House is an area to avoid. In fact, when I brought my brother from California, who hadn't been in Utah for 20 years around, his first comment was, this looks like, when we went to Sugar House, he says, this looks like everywhere in California. And he didn't mean that as a positive. So whereas market needs to be respected, I think the community needs to be respected as well. The character of a community has a lot of intrinsic value, and that's why people live in specific communities. Whereas your comment regarding compatible use and being towards the core of commercial, this isn't really a walkable area. You're talking about more traffic on a road that already has quite a few units on it. So I have some concerns with that.
I appreciate the comments that we've had. I think it's a legitimate option for the council to ask for expert opinions on traffic and water and hear from professionals to unemotionally evaluate is there any issues with the road and the traffic, or are there any issues with the water, and to call on professionals for that and make a fact-based rather than a decision on that's a legitimate option that you have.
I would not feel comfortable voting until we've re-looked at the general plan for that area and decided for sure what we want down there.
So, right, so I respect that. Now, you've heard from Lisa that your job as a city council is you have to judge the merits of an application based on the rules that were there at the time. And yes, we can change the plan, but this is a piece between residential, medium, and commercial. So the options are fairly limited. Are there commercial options for that land? Absolutely. It's not a prime roadway, but there's commercial options. What the residential, it's not, single-family homes there would be a significant challenge because you can't put a cul-de-sac there. We don't allow cul-de-sacs at certain depths. So there are some challenges with that piece of property that are legitimate.
I would actually motion to table ordinance 2017-18 pending a review of the water pressure and comments related to traffic and the ability to keep that road repaired by Public Works.
So we have a motion to table ordinance 2017-18 and a second. I have 2 seconds. We'll just take the first.
Okay.
I think Stephanie did first.
Would that be specifically to the next meeting?
It really depends on how fast we can get that turned around from Public Works.
So so specifically, the direction is water pressure?
Water pressure, road maintenance.
Road maintenance report.
I don't know that necessarily, we're not going to commission a traffic study for that necessarily. I mean, I would like to get some feedback on that from our city engineer and from Public Works related to all 3 of those issues.
Can I ask Corey a couple of questions?
Excuse me just a second. 3 issues being water
road
pressure.
Maintenance, water pressure, and traffic congestion.
Yes, we had a motion on the table. Time for good for discussions or questions. Questions for Corey.
Didn't we recently have some change on this property just a year and a half ago? I tried quickly to find something in old minutes.
On this particular property,
On this
no.
particular, we didn't.
The Hafoka property went from agricultural low to residential low to residential medium, but this property has been in this condition.
I thought we did something when Bell bought it.
No, we looked at this for a fire station, but it did not work.
Yeah, not for a zoning.
And we did have a traffic study on the Hafoka property.
Hafoka, correct.
Right.
So those same results are
they insisted, maybe the wrong word, but they insisted there was no traffic issue.
Yeah, the volumes were so low that it was, in their mind, it was really irrelevant for this road or the intersection of 400 West or frontage. Where they saw future was the congestion of the commercial at Bolano Way, is what the traffic study said.
Obviously, anytime you've got a significant construction project, there are implementation difficulties, okay? Are you the one that monitors those difficulties and brightens responsibilities to the neighbors?
No, not necessarily. I'm just responsible for the zoning and the private improvements. If you're looking at the streets, like the construction of the streets, the bonds, the warranties, that's managed by the city engineer and public works director.
Well, but road blockages and damage to the road that doesn't get fixed for months and all of that.
Yeah, that's the engineer and public works director's role.
And do we have to have someone file a complaint in order to hear about it, or?
Well, it's two factors. While a project's under construction, that's an ongoing monitoring as they proceed through the project and begin to want releases, as well as when they want to close out and go to warranty, then inspections are made. And through the process, as they repave, they're supposed to do the testing for compaction, and they can report on all of those matters for the project. My suspicion is that we have not closed out that project, so therefore final inspections and fixes and wrap-ups have not been.
But on an interim basis, if you're talking about something that's going to go on for a 2-year period of time, homeowners in the neighborhood have the right to expect not to be too inconvenienced.
Yeah,
now,
don't
what
hit
is
a
too
sinkhole.
inconvenienced is beauty's in the eye of the beholder. But
Yeah,
so I guess what I'm saying is
we operate on that complaint. If somebody wants and raises a concern, they can report that to the public works director, and he can investigate it. So if it's a real hazard showing up, even though they're under construction, they certainly would look at that hazard and make them do an emergency fix if a big pothole showed up. But that's just an ongoing monitoring system by them as they do the construction. Whether it's their contractor that cut the road, we also install the water lines ourselves. So that's what they look at, is who's doing what and where they're at in the process. But yeah, you will have roads torn up as they do projects.
Well, yeah, and it's a nightmare. I mean, they replaced the road at the end of my street 2 years ago, and I still remember the pain, and it's a gain now, but these folks aren't getting any benefit out of it.
Understood. It's part of living in conflict.
I guess the one other thing that I'd like to express is, and I am very torn in this kind of a situation because I don't know where one person's property rights end and the next person's begins. And I have a tendency to want to believe that a person should be able to do what they want on their property within reasons of zoning, but at the same point in time, there needs to be some consideration to the people that are around them. And this is something that is very difficult for me.
It's a challenge, I think, that's the challenge of municipal government. Property rights versus community benefit. We have a motion on the table and a second. Any further discussion on that motion?
I would only agree with that motion if we could have that on the agenda for next meeting, and I really assume that that would be doable for staff.
I don't see why not.
So the motion is to table the ordinance and ask for staff report on road maintenance, water pressure, and traffic congestion.
Can we add, do you mind adding to the motion the date of the next meeting? Are you comfortable with that?
I would ask the maker of the motion.
Well, my statement is whenever the staff has it available. So if they have it available for next meeting, great. If it takes longer, that's staff's availability. So I think what we're asking for is some pretty simple sampling and some analysis that could be done in a few days at best. So I don't anticipate it being a problem.
Agreed.
I would like to also add to the list of issues that George mentioned, a summary of complaints filed by the homeowners in Shayla Park who were the most directly affected of the difficulties they've experienced during the construction period. I don't know how important that is in the long-term scheme of things, but it's important to me.
Well, I don't know that there'll be a record of that. The recollection is maybe all that can be relied upon.
Well, other than what we heard tonight, which is what George's list is based on, so I think that's reasonable.
Well, but he's talking, I guess I'm talking safety. And if someone was half run off the road, that road is fairly narrow, which is one of the problems I had with the issue in the first place.
Yeah, we could wrap that in as a sub under the traffic congestion issues as an issue to address. I think that would work. And Tammy, if it makes you feel better, I can add the next one. I'm looking at Steve. I'm trying not to push him into a corner and saying you have to have it. If you think it's doable, I don't have a problem adding by next council meeting for the reports. Or
I think we can emphasize to staff that we'd like, this is an important issue.
Yeah, now let me get some clarification though when you talk about in terms of analysis. Water pressure, obviously we can, I think we can measure and document those kind of things. Traffic congestion, I don't know how you do anything quantifiable there and compare it against a standard other than what we have had a traffic engineer study in the connection with the approval of the Brighton Homes project, townhomes project. Road maintenance and utility cuts and those kind of things, there's some history there that Randy and Kevin should be able to recall. And I would like to see them come, actually, not just provide information in advance, but come and answer further questions.
that would be ideal.
Okay.
Sounds good. So the motion on the table is to table ordinance 2017-18. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's tabled unanimously. So, Mr. Williams?
Yeah, I have one question. I don't know if it's appropriate. I've already been up there. But I don't know if that's to scale, but I've driven through Brighton Homes several times because we put up flags. And according to the scale up there, is there one road in or are there two roads in and out?
Two.
Two entrances.
For the new development you're talking about,
Yeah. For the new one.
Oh, the new
we
one.
know what there is currently, but for the new proposal.
You mean the existing proposal? So we're at the conceptual site, or we're at the zoning. They have not submitted a site plan, but the developer could comment. I can't imagine there's room for more than one road.
Yeah, there's not room.
There doesn't appear to be.
And if there is one, I hate to keep continuing,
Yeah.
if there is one, doesn't the city have an ordinance on the length?
We do have requirements on that regarding a fire department or a fire truck turnaround, so there's restrictions on the width and where the length of a cul-de-sac or where a fire department turnaround has to be placed. And I don't believe that analysis has taken place because we're just at the zoning stage and not at the site plan stage. That typically would take place at the site plan.
Mayor, there is a concept submitted just for information. It doesn't mean this is what they're going to do necessarily, but this is a concept drawing that came with the application packet.
Right, but we really shouldn't be considering that at this point.
Right.
Yeah,
But
what
that's the
we've learned in the
concept.
past is that what those concepts are and what happens are two different things.
And that's why the motion was just for those 3 areas of impact, nothing to do with the conceptual.
So that item is tabled. We thank you for your input and a respectful manner in which discuss this issue. So thank you for that. Next item on our agenda is another public hearing, This was for a zoning code amendment, quite different incentives for the historical landmark register. Corey, I assume you were on this. Oh, we have Cassie is up. Yes, now we'll see if this continues. Cassie has never been denied.
We can just call her Babe Ruth.
Yeah, Corey is...
Bad about 25%.
All right, good evening, everyone. Here to discuss the incentives for the properties on the Historic Landmarks Register. As you guys know, the Dual Creek Historic District was created last year, and we as a city offer voluntary incentives for the properties located within that district. So you can get anywhere between 25% and 100% off your building permit if you are a new development or a property listed on the Historic Landmarks Register. And there are about 25 properties total in the city that are on this Historic Landmarks Register. And yep, there they are on the map. And you'll notice that the vast majority of them are within the Dual Creek Historic District, but there's about 10 of them that are not. And so we as staff noticed that it seemed a little bit unfair that all of the homes within the Dual Creek Historic District are offered these incentives for building permits, but not the ones that are on the National Register of Historic Places that just happen to be outside of the neighborhood. So this would just extend the incentives for building permit review to those, the entire list of the Historic Landmarks Register, which is only in addition about 10 homes right now. We can always put more on if they get nominated, but right now it's only about 10 homes that aren't in the district.
And remind us the criteria to get on that list.
Yeah, so our list is called the Historic Landmarks Register, and it's almost all of those properties are concurrently also on the National Register of Historic Places, and so you have to be nominated, do a lot of research on the home, and then be nominated at the state level to be on that list. So it's a pretty distinguished list for historical places. So if any of those buildings were ever to want renovations or additions, they would come to us and get a building permit. And if you were in the Dual Creek neighborhood, you would be eligible for incentives on your building permit because of its historic placement. But for those 10 homes that aren't in Dual Creek, you wouldn't get a discount. So thought that was a little bit unfair. So we wanted to offer those incentives for all of the homes on the list, since it is a big deal.
And the feedback from the Planning Commission?
Yep, June 28th, they voted on it unanimously.
I think it's a great idea. I appreciate coming up with this idea. I think it's really a positive
Yeah, I was
thing.
just going to say I was thrilled to see the proactive action from the Landmarks Commission. This just makes sense.
I would motion to approve or adopt ordinance 2017-19 after we get our public hearing in. I'm telegraphing that. Shouldn't telegraph that, but I did. It's more along the lines, the older I get, the more close I become to becoming history, the more I look at wanting to preserve it, so.
Great. Any other questions for Cassie? And we're going to hold that motion until after we have a public hearing.
My bad. Lisa will correct me later. I caught it.
If there are no questions, I'll go ahead and open this for public hearing. Is there anyone who would like to speak about this proposed change to the zoning code amendment?
I mainly would like some more information. I know that where does the money come from? Whose pocket does the money come from?
Yours.
City taxes?
That depends. For
So
what?
state?
So we charge we charge building permits to recover cost that staff incurs. So this is, you're essentially absorbing cost that would otherwise be reimbursed.
I have no idea in this community how many more potential properties could be researched. I'm very familiar with the National Register of Historic Places. I've been involved in placing the building on it. It was very unique, the only one in Utah. Very unique. I also know that the policy is that we maintain and preserve a representative sample, that we don't preserve everything, and we can go overboard here and we can put a burden on taxpayers. So all I'm saying is that not necessarily a historic district, but some of the most significant ones, and the ones that are not need still be documented, photographically, and measurements and stuff like that, because if they're changed, you lose the ability to do that. There's a building up here that doesn't need it. It's the second oldest continuously occupied building of the LDS Church. It is not on the register. I feel that that building needs to be on the register, but it doesn't need to have any subsidy. And it's an old building. That's the old original chapel for Centerville. So I just wanted to clarify. I know that we're in a tight spot with taxpayers. We're going to be asking for some more money, and I think we need to, keep this in our scope of considerations. And every dollar that's spent has to be the most important dollar spent. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I would add that I'm not insensitive, because I did receive in 1986 the Utah Historic Preservation Award for the state of Utah.
Thank you. Let's see if there's anyone else who would like to speak, and then we'll let you respond to that, Cassie. Is there anybody else who would like to speak about this change? If not, Cassie, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, so our Historic Landmarks Register is just the list of 25 homes, and almost all of them are on the National Register. And that's kind of our elite list of historic homes in the city. And then we also have a secondary list that's just called Significant Sites. And possibly that church that you were talking about is already on there. We have a lot of sites on that list that not necessarily have the caliber to be on the National Register, but are just locally, historically significant and want to be recognized on a list. And this zoning ordinance change would not be extending that to our significant sites list. It would just be those currently 25 lists that are on the National Register and our Historic Landmarks Register.
And I think a point of clarification worthwhile is the word incentive implies money going out to someone, I think. But these incentives are really just change in setback, reduction, or elimination of a permit application fee having to be paid. So there is no actual money that is already in city coffers going outward.
True.
But I don't want that to be misunderstood, though. I mean, we do have to pay an inspector for to plan reviews and inspection of the construction. If that's not covered by a building permit, then it's covered by taxpayer money. Just to be forthright here.
Sure. So you're
right. And
so the question is, is the community at large, taxpayers at large, willing to subsidize, which is a very small subsidy, these historic homeowners when they want to make a change to their home to keep the historic nature of it, or incentivize them to preserve some of that historic nature? If there was a lot of homes impacted, I would say, hey, this could be a real fiscal cost. 10 homes probably is not, relatively speaking.
And that's assuming that they all update.
Yeah, and they're not all going to.
Even updating can get them off the list, so that knocks them off of the incentive thing already. So there's a very small window of what's allowed to be changed to a home and still maintained on that list, and it's only the portion of the fee for that that little bit that we're talking about. It's really quite small.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff? If not, I'd entertain a motion, George.
I'm not going to make that motion because I jumped the gun. I apologize to the public. I swore I'd never do that, and I just did. So
I'm
going to let somebody else make
I
that
will
motion.
be.
I don't think it's
I
going
would
to
be willing to make a motion for the approval of ordinance 2017-19 with regard to expanding qualifications for participation in the zoning code benefits for historic assets outside of the historic area.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we adopt ordinance 2017-19, which amends the zoning ordinance regarding incentives for historic assets on the Historic Landmark Register. Any further discussion? Let's do this by roll call vote. Tammy?
Aye.
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 That passes unanimously. Thank you. Keep your winning streak alive. Thank you, and thank you for the comments. We have one more public hearing scheduled that I'd like to take, and that is a request for a business license revocation release. Lisa, we'll ask you to provide a staff report on this before we hold a public hearing.
Yes. You have before you a request for relief from our code that requires once a business license has been revoked, you cannot be issued a new one for 12 months. I think at the last meeting we discussed the reasons and policy behind this code, but the council amended the code to provide for some sort of relief in certain circumstances. And so we've adopted a new ordinance that's now in our business licensing provisions that allows someone to request relief from this 12-month license restriction under certain circumstances. So we have this request from Tim Flannery of Cleaner Image Dry Cleaning. He has requested that the council provide some relief from this 12-month period. And so I believe in your packet you have a copy of Section 6.03.102 of the Municipal Code, which provides 5 things for you to look at. That it must be the first time the person has had a business license revoked. The person must pay for all delinquent business license fees. They must pay for all pending civil or criminal penalties. They must be in good standing with the state and pay for back taxes, and show sufficient evidence that they meet all fire, health, and police regulations. So my suggestion to you is that you hear from Mr. Flannery. He's here tonight again to present his case to you. You can ask him any questions and review that information that he has submitted, after which you will need to have a public hearing to see if there's anyone to speak against this. And then after that, you can make a decision or ask staff any further questions.
All right, thank you for that report. At this point, we ask Mr. Flannery if you'd like to come, and this microphone's having a little trouble, so we'll invite you to this one, and we appreciate you coming back.
I'll tell you, Mayor and Council, my hat's off to you. This is better than reality TV.
This is reality TV. This is reality.
But anyway, I salute you. Hey, I'm here to make a donation to the city fund. And I'd like to do that today. I understand you're in dire need, and I've got about $400 I think that I owe, and I'd like to do that today. Now,
put another 0 on that.
You know, I feel that I have met these stipulations, and we'll go over them. My accountant was at scout camp until 6 o'clock tonight. I did talk to him briefly. Obviously, this is my first offense. I have paid the civil penalties. I have proof of that. I'd love to pay whatever I owe to the city as far as my business license and stuff. Number 4, I have with me, and I've worked hard with the state to get this letter that shows that I'm in good standing and that my license is, or that my EIN is active. And I understand there's some concern with back taxes, and let me tell you what happened. When I first opened, my sales were very, very low, and I was unable to make those taxes for approximately the first year. When I entered into an agreement with the state, they said as long as you maintain your current taxes, pay $400 a month to the arrears, that's how come I got this letter saying I'm in good standing. I've worked hard to rectify all of my problems. I have my federal and my state, and number 5, or the last one, the only one that I don't have, I called the fire department and they said that I am current on my last inspection. The health department has no concern. I have no equipment in there, so as far as environmentally, all of that, I'm in good shape. I don't anticipate ever putting it in there. Again, my business is growing, and I just appreciate the chance to get back on my feet and to continue with my life. That's all.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you putting that together. At this point, I'll open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone who would like to speak on this matter for a business license revocation release. Is there anyone who would like to speak? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and turn to the council for action. Lisa, do you have any, if the council is so inclined, my recommendation is that we work hard to solve this problem. Do you have any guidance on conditions or findings?
And just a comment, our ordinance does require you to make written findings and a written decision so that we can provide that to the petitioner and the business license official. So I did send out a draft if you're inclined to approve this with some suggested findings, which is just going through the requirements that he does have his state business license. He is in, and that's attached to the packet, and he has paid his fine to the city justice court. So the only suggested conditions that I have is that he has to pay his delinquent business license fees before that can be reinstated. And the council also needs to determine the period which you will grant relief. So the code says a new business license cannot be issued for 12 months from the date of revocation, which I think officially was May 9th because of the period. So you could say we want to go 2 months, 6 months, you know, May, June, July. 2 months he could be back in business.
What does he need to have an uninterrupted? Is it he needs then 5 months or 6 months? Gets him to December and then he gets his normal.
Well, if you want to allow him to open up business right away, then you would say that the 12-month restriction period is hereby reduced to a period of 2 months, or so May, June, July. Or you could say is reduced until such and such a date, but
like
2 months gets you about to July 10th, so.
So kind of like a time-served situation.
Right, exactly. That's just a proposal. And then also that in accordance with the Justice Court order, he needs to provide evidence of this new business license by August 10th back to the Justice Court. So I think that's a good incentive to make sure that our delinquent fees get paid so that he can show the license to the Justice Court at that time.
So I have a couple questions. One is, you're saying that we would add a condition that delinquent business license fees would need to be paid. So those still have not been paid?
That's correct. He's willing to pay them. There was some concern. We didn't want him to think that if he paid them, then he had a business license. So we wanted to wait until the council actually rendered a decision, and if he and he can go pay those tomorrow and get it in.
So that was intentional decision on staff's part. And then this number 3, the person must pay for all delinquent or pending civil or criminal penalties and settle or conclude any such civil or criminal enforcement actions with the city. So my question is, has he actually closed business and not been running business? Because wasn't that a criminal enforcement that was an action with the city that actually never got followed through on?
The criminal enforcement, he was issued a criminal citation for Class C misdemeanor. Or actually it might have been a Class B misdemeanor for operating business without a license. And the way that criminal provisions go is that we just issue it for that day. So for instance, we went in and said, you're operating for this day. So that's what that criminal penalty was. He did go to the Justice Court and settle that. As to operating business since then, I'm not familiar with that.
Okay, well, I'll just say that.
And he hasn't, and I will say he hasn't been issued another, we have not taken additional enforcement action or issued any additional criminal penalty that has not been remedied. Now, we could have, if he was continuing, certainly we could send an officer over there again.
I'll just say that I'm glad for the ordinance changes that we made, but in my mind, the reason for the ordinance changes and the reason for this list is to actually encourage a higher level of compliance. And where I don't see that the compliance to the ordinance and our written laws as to not running the business until the council decides to allow you to do so again ever got complied with, I don't feel comfortable at this point with approving this. That's my personal opinion on it.
Thanks for your perspective. Any other questions or comments? My position on this is that staff and Mr. Flannery have tried to work to find a solution. This is, I agree, this might be more of a spirit than a letter of the law, but I think Mr. Flannery has shown significant effort to try to get back in compliance. And I would support the council giving him another shot to have a legally open business and have a license.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I think we essentially made the decision when we made the ordinance change 2 weeks ago, and holding his feet in the fire on a detail that we didn't totally maybe anticipate doesn't make sense. And on the basis of that, I would propose that we implement the provisions of the license revocation restriction lifting on Mr. Flannery so that he can finish paying all of the fees, and that upon payment of all of the fees, he be given a business license again under this revised ordinance.
They would include adopting the findings that Lisa's provided.
Correct.
And the conditions that she recommended.
And what period of time would you like to add to condition A?
I would add the period of time of the time that it's been since his license was lifted or suspended.
I'll second that.
So moved and seconded that we
Stephanie?
that we approve this request for business license revocation release and adopt the findings that staff has recommended and the conditions. Any further discussion?
I just want to make one other comment, that I feel that, like I say, it's good to have this ordinance in place. I feel like this won't come up very often, but the way that we're going about it is kind of setting up the expectation and the precedent. Another thing I was disappointed about is that we did not see physical evidence in our staff report before this meeting of all of these conditions. And so we're just getting kind of a statement at the mic. These guys said it was okay, this guy said it was okay, and to me that's not sufficient effort for the seriousness of the problems that have happened here. So,
thank you for that clarification. Without further discussion, let's vote on this, starting with Robin.
Aye.
Aye.
I've recused myself.
Aye.
no.
That's 3-1 that passes. So we look forward to finishing the conditions and being back in business.
So I can pay that tomorrow.
Let's see if we could take one more item number 7 before we take a quick break, as we've got people waiting here. Municipal code amendments for the Whitaker Museum property. Lisa, I believe you've been working on this with the museum team.
Yes. Let me get to the next item.
Corey.
And thank you for all your work on this, you and Corey, with Mr. Flannery. Appreciate that.
You're welcome. The next item is a proposed municipal code amendment. This is a city-initiated amendment that essentially started with the Whitaker Museum Board. They wanted to be recognized in the municipal code as a public asset. So for instance, in our Title VIII, we have our cemeteries and our parks. They just wanted another chapter in there that specifically addressed the Whitaker Museum and the grounds and who maintains and what sorts of policies and things apply. So I've prepared an ordinance 2017-20, adding a new chapter to Title 8 called the Whitaker Museum. And essentially, I just kind of looked at some of the provisions that we used for our parks and our cemetery, and not a lot of them were very applicable to the museum property, but some of them were about regulating animals and other things. And so it's a short chapter, but I think one of importance to the museum board and all the volunteers and the work that they do over there. So since this is a municipal code amendment, it does not require a public hearing, but we do have representatives from the museum board that I think Spence Packer would, if you have any questions, he might like to speak to this.
Yes, we'd invite Spence and our museum director to make any comments if they'd like.
Thank you for taking this up and taking your time and staff's time. I know Lisa spent numerous hours, and then we've reviewed it as a board several times and tweaked it as we've gone along, but I think this is an important step to give us kind of a legal niche, if you would, in the city that we haven't had in the past, and some recognition and such. So thank you for the consideration. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I would just like to say, along the same lines as with the Landmarks Commission issue, I just love that we have active boards and committees and commissions that will do the work and bring these things forward to improve our ordinances. And so thank you.
Any questions for our museum chair? If not,
Let me off easy, thanks.
How's the renovation going?
But thank you.
I'm just kidding.
Long story.
Let's not talk about the budget there.
Yeah.
So the recommendation is to adopt ordinance 2017-20. Unless, Lisa, is there anything you want to add?
No, I guess George didn't really have questions.
No, I didn't have a question. I was retracting that.
We'll cover that another time.
It's definitely an issue for another time.
I'll move that we approve ordinance 2017-20.
Second.
It's moved to the second that the council adopt ordinance 2017-20, amending, enacting chapter 804 of the Centerville Municipal Code regarding the Whitaker Museum property. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
I was just going to.
Oh.
That was good.
Sorry about that.
Was that a vote or a comment?
It's a comment,
Okay.
and then it's a vote. I just want to thank Lisa Summer and Lisa Romney, as well as Chair Packer and the others on the museum board. I heard about this in the works long before I was assigned to the museum. So it's been years in the making, and the detail that has gone into this and the debate over word choices and liability, making sure that there's not liability caused to the city that we aren't up for, has just been amazing to me. This document has been poured over blood, sweat, and tears by a lot of people, and I want to thank them for really putting forward the museum, making sure that it's legitimate, for going out to grants, for being able to be in competition for monies from other places, from the state, from other entities, and to make sure that we're taking care of the history and the artifacts that we have here at the museum. So thank you so much.
I want to second that.
And now I'll say aye.
All right, all those in favor of 2017-20?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. I'd recommend we take a 5-minute break.
Sounds good. The problem is, the last one, we have two that show the same date, and I didn't know which order to watch them in. So, I had to go through
Let's move quickly. I still have to drive to Sterling tonight. So.
Not tonight.
Yes, tonight.
Stephanie.
The other side of Manti. 15 minutes outside of Manti.
Tonight?
My daughter.
Okay, let's reconvene, please.
Did you turn it back on?
I turned the mics back on, and
All
I
right.
assume they're working fine. You can hear us? Great. So let's, next up on our agenda, we we had an item to discuss proposed Main Street sign ordinance amendments, and I believe, Tammy, this is your item that you wanted to bring up.
Right, so anytime we're suggesting change to the zoning ordinance, of course, that would go through the planning commission. And sign ordinance can really, anytime you jump into the sign ordinance, it can be kind of a beastly thing, but what I'm suggesting is extraordinarily simple. And that would be to suggest that the planning commission just only visit the Main Street section, and there's only one line at the very end that allows one exception situation where electronic signs would be allowed. And it can be argued one way or another whether in any circumstance that should be there, but certainly we don't want it there as a loophole also. So that's my opinion on the matter, and that we should just send it to the planning commission and see what they say, and then we'd get a full report and be able to visit it. And then the other suggestion is, because sign issues can be a little bit of a heated topic, that we should place a TZRO on the Main Street section of sign ordinance, just so that we can decide before, because it'll take a while for it to go to the planning commission and come back to us. And if people were so inclined, very many applications could come in the meantime. So unless there's a need for further discussion, I would just make the motion that we send to the planning commission direction to visit this section as soon as possible in that focused, simple way would be the first motion.
I'll second that.
So the motion is, that's been seconded, is to direct the planning commission and staff to revisit electronic signs on Main Street, particularly close the existing allowance that allows multi-tenant properties to have a electronic sign.
So
Further
would that
discussion
take
on
all
this?
electronic signs off of Main Street?
Main Street.
Yeah, well, it's...
Right now, they're prohibited
Right.
in general anyway, and then there's just this one exception.
So what we're doing is making
Kim the only electronic sign.
Samuelson the only.
And Maverick, which never had a permit anyway, but they have an electronic gas sign.
So they'll both be non-conforming if the planning commission says yes and it comes back to us and we say yes?
A legal
Which meant
non-conforming
that
use. Well, Maverick's
legal.
never been,
Conforming.
but
But they were probably there before we had an ordinance.
I don't think they were, but it'd be
That would be
hard to make the case. that that's
if it's bothering someone, call and start the enforcement action, but.
So are you comfortable with that position? That you just grandfathered Kim Samuelson and gave him rights that no one else gets?
Well, we have no recommendation from the planning commission. This
Right.
motion so far is just send it down, so we haven't given him anything.
I would hate to see
at this point.
Maverick, somebody file a complaint against them because of this now where they've had it. We're putting a TZRO so they can't come in and apply.
So the first motion is just
Just that it
send
should
it
be
back.
studied and brought back to us.
nothing about Cesar yet.
Should be simple. I think they should be able to probably get it in their next meeting and get it back to us quickly.
I hadn't really thought about it as much maybe as it needed to. I am loath to give the planning commission any things to do until we've dealt with the granulation of the zoning. I'd like to see it be their A1 top priority until we get it fixed so we don't have more problems come up like tonight. And I don't see the electronic sign being any more, being more of a pressing thing than that. I think our how many we allow per acre for our zoning code is a lot more important, and I don't want to distract them from that effort until they're done with it. So,
having sat through sign discussions while on the Planning Commission, I think you're dreaming when you think it's that simple. Because it just went on and on and on. I'm not commenting on whether I agree or not. I'm just saying it is not going to be simple.
Well, I have had the same experience, and so that's why I really could agree with you, other than I think this is focused. I also think that let me pull this up really quick to make my point. In the Main Street sign ordinance itself, it does say on the very first line, intent and purpose, the Main Street Commercial District is defined as any commercially zoned land on Main Street south of Parish Lane to Pages Lane. This area is considered to be an architecturally, aesthetically, and historically sensitive area within the city. So my point is that this, in my opinion, is a no-brainer because this is the entrance to our historic district. We have our beautiful Whitaker Museum that we celebrate. We've had many words spoken with this council about the value of that historic area and trying to preserve the nature of our community. And so this is, in my opinion, a very simple way to quickly make sure that we're putting a safety in place to preserve that. Electronic signs can kind of catch on like wildfire. And to say, I get your point that you have this really big priority that you don't want to slow down, but that's kind of like saying, I have a big project at work, and so I can't eat lunch, in my opinion. Like there are small things. Well, I can't eat any meals of the day. There are still small things you have to do, and the fact that you have a huge thing on your plate shouldn't bump away all the small things, in my opinion.
Thank you. Further discussion.
I remember the sign questions when the question was, where's it going to be rock? And did it have to be a monument sign? And that's still a painful topic for a lot of people, so I don't think that any sign discussion is going to go any quickly or any painless anything. So I'll stay with where I am.
You wouldn't be opposed to sending it down at a future time, you just want the other out first?
I want the other resolved first, and it feels kind of targeted rather than focused to me, so.
Targeted to our historically significant area, absolutely.
No, it feels targeted to our most recent electronic sign, to me, but.
The only example that we've seen come through on Main Street, which I think exemplifies the weakness of the ordinance, which is why I'm suggesting the change. But his is gonna be legally non-conforming, and so it's not targeting him in a way that hurts him because he's there.
Unless he wants to make any changes to his property. The whole non-conforming thing. Anyway, I'm trying to drive to Sterling tonight, so I've already got my opinion, so I'll stop talking.
So the motion on the table is to ask the Planning Commission to reconsider electronic signs and removing to prohibit them completely, not allowing multi-tenant use. Any further discussion on that?
I'm not particularly supportive because I'd love to see the city get an electronic sign out in front on a nice, what do you call the kind of sign that he has? Monument, on a nice monument basis to provide information like other cities are doing. I understand that your thought about signs, and if you look at the Maverick sign and some of the signs on Parish, they are quite garish. But a monument sign that has a changing message and is not quite so obtrusive to me is not a problem. Now, at the same point in time, I have to agree I wouldn't want 39 signs between Parish Lane and Pages Lane. 39 electronic signs between Parish Lane and Pages Lane, but at the same point in time, they're not bothersome to me. And when they're nicely done, I don't think they are to most people. So I have a hard time giving you much support.
Okay. Any other discussion? Let's do a roll call vote on this, starting with Tammy.
Aye.
Nay.
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 That fails.
Steve, I want you to hurry up and get one out in front before we pass a different ordinance.
I don't think it's the
With all that
multi-tenant.
extra money.
This isn't a multi-tenant property, is it?
Sure, you got a justice court and you got the city.
Police
I
department.
mean, depending on the night, there's a lot of attendance, right?
I don't know, I look at the one that West Bountiful has and I see that I see it as being a plus. And I see some of North Salt Lake, I believe, has one, and I see it as being a plus.
All right, mayor's report. We had a fire board meeting yesterday. This continues to be a challenging time for our fire service. Lots of fires and medicals. June was a very, very busy month. Reminder that there's an open house tomorrow, 6 to 8. That you're welcome to come and join. They've had 2 open houses so far. Have had very light attendance at the previous open houses.
Oh, it's here, isn't it?
It's here.
And ours is
With
part
ours.
of it.
Correct.
And so Jake
So-
did the boards up before he left, and I'll have those set up in here. And
Great.
so I'll be here to help answer questions, but at least 1 or 2 of you.
I'll
be here.
I will be here
I'll
as
be here.
well.
And ours runs the same time, doesn't it, 6 to 8?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
And it's also,
What's that? Lisa, the question is, do we have to post tomorrow?
We've posted
Well,
it.
we've advertised it,
Oh, I
but
noticed
It's
it.
an open house.
because,
Put it in our
because
newsletter.
as a meeting,
We typically do, but, I mean, it's just an open house, you probably don't have to. We're not taking minutes.
yeah, and we're not making decisions.
I've been encouraging people to come talk to them.
So, anyway, we're going to have it regardless of the notice that we've given.
It's also meet your councilman night. I figured it didn't need to do anything extra.
So, all right, well, it'll be set up, and hopefully some of you will be here.
There's an attached an artist rendering of the proposed Centerville station. This is still conceptual at this time, but the architect has, I believe, met with Corey and they've talked about some of the Main Street design guidelines and how to make this a nicer, something that fits in more with our community. A few complaints from the other board members about why Centerville's being restrictive, but I think it is an attractive building. There would be a little kind of a plaza to the north there by the flag that would have some architectural enhancements. And interestingly, on this, one thing just to point out is these doors. Normally the doors go up, but they've been having a lot of problems with the doors, and they have these new doors they want to try out that fold. They have better insulation, and they're reportedly don't have as many problems. They're a little bit more expensive up front, but these would be doors that would fold together to allow the trucks in and out.
But there's still power.
They're still powered, yes.
Okay.
So.
Is there an override for that? I always get nervous that the trucks are going to get stuck on the inside during some big catastrophe.
You just drive through it.
You can just crash through it, no problem.
I'm sure there is.
Okay.
So want to know more? Come tomorrow. Ask the chief any questions. I'm not sure if we'll have more of a layout, but this is still kind of conceptual at this point. And the Planning Commission did, recommend we'll be sending to you a recommendation to allow a change of use. I believe Corey's gone, but to restrict, don't allow any outdoor storage, but allow a change of use to allow the old fire station to be sold.
I did have one question on that. The comment has gotten back to me through citizens that the Planning Commission we talked about getting to a non-conforming use that had problems, and it was my understanding that what we said was, we would like to find a way to make this work, but we do not want to violate the concept of Main Street. The message that people say the Planning Commission is working to is figure out a way to get this done. Now, there may not be a ton of difference between those two statements, but there is some difference between those two statements. And so if everyone is in agreement with me, I guess I would like to make sure that we tell the Planning Commission, yes, we see a lot of benefit to getting this done and would like to have it done, but we've got to preserve the tone and flavor of Main Street.
So I suggest you...
if you'd like me to, I would be glad to have that conversation.
The Planning Commission is done. It's now coming to the City Council.
It's on your next agenda.
It's on your next agenda. Let's have that discussion on your next agenda.
All right, I did not realize that.
And I think they're somewhat deferring to the City Council to make that decision.
Okay.
I don't have anything new on Utopia or UIA other than the reports that went out. I did want to provide an update. I meant on the Tingy Pavilion. We had discussed last time the Tingy family was considering making a donation and helping us build a pavilion that would be named the Tingy Pavilion in honor of their parents. Elder Tingy confirmed that he's has a verbal commitment from his siblings to contribute $50,000 for that effort. So we're asking Bruce to start doing the design, figuring out what we can do and how do we incorporate it into the park design. So that's, I think, great, and the plan would be in September to have a design to review. So we appreciate the Tingy family's generous contribution to that.
Ask them if they got any extra money for Founders Park.
Yeah. Maybe the Smith Sessions family want to match that. May not have the same, may not be the same situation. That's everything on my report. Number 10, John Higgins, and I spoke with him today. He asked that we postpone, the Integrated Waste District did not meet as planned, and they're having some additional meetings in August and September. He has to come back in September when he anticipated having some data for us and some useful feedback. Steve, City Manager's report.
I have just one matter, and I need Lisa's advice on it. And I intended to talk to you today, Lisa, but we didn't connect on this one. You're having a public hearing on August 8th on the property tax increase, and it's also a hearing on the tentative budget. So my question is, and we may have to, Lisa, you and I may have to go consult the Uniform Fiscal Procedures Act. You adopted a tentative budget back in June, but your adopted budget did not include the tax increase. And it was in June, that on June 20th, that you, I think it was June 20th, or was it the earlier meeting in June, that you decided to well, it was June, the earlier meeting in June, when you had the public hearing on the tentative budget. When you also agreed that you were going to propose, you were proposing the property tax increase, and you set the date for that and so forth. The question is do we have to have the council amend the tentative budget with any kind of action, formal action, in order to make it available 10 days before the public hearing on August 8th? I asked this question today of Heidi at the county, and she thought she had some conversation with you, but she referred us back to the act. And so I guess if that's the case, If we have to call you back for a short special meeting to formally amend so that we can meet that 10-day requirement, we may have to do that. We'll check this out and see if we can get by without that. If we conclude that we don't need to do that, then here's my intent, and that is that by Friday, July 28th, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, by Friday, July 28th, when we're preparing the packet for your August 1st meeting, we will have recommended amendments to the tentative budget in the packet. We can talk about those in the work session on August 1st prior to your regular meeting. And that will be public then. Those recommended amendments will be public as of that Friday, July 28th, which will be 10 days, meet the 10-day requirement before the August 8th public hearing on the property tax increase and the tentative budget. You following all this?
My inclination is it's burning council time, but I'd rather err on the side of a special meeting and adopting the amendments to the budget rather than run the risk or have people assume, hey, you pulled a fast one. I didn't have enough time to review your actual published amended budget. It seems like it'd be a very short meeting, but at least it would be out amended and published.
Yeah, we could do that, and especially be simple if all you were doing in amending the budget was what are you going to do with this $400,000. When we come to you on August 1st, we're going to have some other tweaking to the tentative budget, but I don't think that is a violation because you still have the right to amend the tentative budget. Right. But I think this additional $400,000 approximately due to the tax increase probably needs to be somehow stated and amended. The budget needs to be amended regarding that, it seems.
I think it would be foolish for us not to show hard and fast what the use of proceeds are in the budget. Even for simplicity's sake, if you say it's shoring up the general fund from 5.6 to whatever, as far as shoring it up, that's at least demonstrating here's where it is and here's where it's going. I don't know that necessarily I would be up for saying 200,000 goes here, 100,000 goes here, and 100,000 goes here initially, as much as just saying formally we've adopted that it's going to the general fund. But I don't know.
Well, I think you do have to state the purpose. I don't know how specific you have to be. We did state the purpose, though, right? Well, you said, yeah, for those three street maintenance, police services, and building up the reserve. And so I presume that would satisfy the. I presume that would satisfy the.
Steve, is there, if we hold the public hearing on the 8th, but don't adopt the budget formally until the 15th, the regular meeting?
The requirement, as I understand it, is 10 days before the public hearing, you have to have the amended budget available.
Okay, so let's, and we amend it, and then if we change it again, we can change it again. But
right.
So is that something you can do 10 days ahead of time? Or?
Well, I think you could have a brief meeting on next Tuesday if you wanted to. You know, you could meet at 5:30 or 6, 6:30, 7, whatever. Anybody that can't be here could telephone in, I suppose. And
I will be out of town. But
okay, Mayor Pro Tem, who's that?
I'll be here.
Who?
I will be here.
Stephanie. Does that work for the rest of you to do that on
next
Tuesday night?
What, next Tuesday?
Next Tuesday?
I think 14 too.
And it really could be a very brief meeting. Lisa, is this sounding reasonable to you?
Yeah, I think that sounds good to formally.
Kind of a safe way to play it. Okay. What time do you want to do this?
No, 14's there.
Tuesday night.
I'm flexible.
I'm fairly flexible.
You want to try to get it early?
I have a training meeting that day, but I haven't scheduled the time, so pick your time and I'll work.
Now, is there a committee meeting that night?
No.
For any of you? No?
I don't.
Okay, well, I mean, it's up to you. If you want to if you can get here by 6, we could do it at 6 or
Okay.
5:30 or 7, whatever.
I can join electronically if it's very late, but I don't think.
You don't think I don't think you're needed,
I'm on
yeah.
the East Coast and busy until about 9.
So what time you want to do it?
Let's say it's 6.
6 o'clock?
Is that okay?
Okay.
Okay.
6 o'clock next Tuesday. That's the only business I have, other than hopefully you're willing to go into a closed meeting still later.
Yes, before we go into closed meeting, miscellaneous business, I think, Robin, you had something you wanted to bring up.
I do. Don't everybody panic. And I worry. I want to let the Parks Department and everybody know that haven't lost my mind. After watching the Planning Commission meeting, they very strongly are looking at wanting some type of a park over at the Dix Market area. As I am getting a ton of pressure about the cemetery. I don't really know another appropriate place for the cemetery. I know we'd looked at $2 million going into Island View. So I was wondering, if I understand it right, if Island View is not kept as a park, we have to pay back $79,000, but that's a pretty cheap cemetery. And then we have to replace the ground. So if we were to keep a small park there for the neighbors, expand the cemetery up into Island View, take and put a park next to the DI, I believe, and this is all just preliminary, so what I'd like to do is just throw this out there and then ask for a work meeting and staff to look into some of this. But watching the Planning Commission meeting, they're talking about the church being willing to maybe put some money into it because they're not really thrilled about having backyards right next to their pickup point. We're on the edge of Bountiful. We might be able to get Bountiful to go in on the park with us. And then if we had a developer come in and be willing to develop, and we were to use their open space and maybe their park infrastructure fees, that we might be able to put a really nice park, maybe splash pad, whatever, between the DI and their homes, which they would obviously, people would a lot rather have their backyard go up to the back of a park instead of the DI pick up and put up or drop off. So me and Stephanie have done some work on this, and we just think we have some ideas of where maybe we could get a lot of people to go in together and get the money. We could expand the cemetery up into Island View Park, which is, I mean, it would really be nice to keep the cemetery all in one area there.
Absolutely.
And so I'm just thinking that if we could put this park down there, we'd reduce some of that density. They'd up their value of their homes, so maybe they wouldn't have to have quite so many. And we'd put a park there in for that neighborhood.
Where would we come up with the money to buy the land and build the park?
Well, if we have a developer that's coming in, we may be able to do their open space for a lot of it. And then, like I said, if we work with, we're not going to have to buy the Dix Market and knock that down. We're just going to have the park at the bottom next to the DI. And if they were to work with us and use their, I talked to Corey. We figured that their fees might be $130,000 to $150,000. That if we would let them use their fees to help develop this. So it's got some questions, but I think it has some possibilities. I'd like a work session, that we could look into this and see. I feel bad because the Parks Board Committee has done so much work on doing Island View, but yet I don't want to put $2 million into Island View and then have somebody decide that's where the cemetery's got to go. So we wouldn't have the $2 million we're going to put up there, but we could maybe get a matching grant for that. So we've got $2 million that was going to go into Island View that could be moved down to the other park.
You do. Now you've got to a significant expense to change Island View Park into cemetery space.
Well, and
That
that's
would be-
kind of what I'd like the staff of the city to just not spend, I just would like a work session on it where we could kind of brainstorm and see if this was a possibility. Before we go any further with Island View, the people are really upset that we have no cemetery. And so.
It's pretty
It's
desperate.
pretty bad. There are a few that
They're
don't.
really upset if we want to expand the cemetery.
You think they will be
No, they were really upset when we wanted to expand the cemetery.
Well, because we were going west, and
Right.
it caused a lot of problems.
And that's what I said. I have no idea what reception we'll get to this. It was just a thought, and I thought we need to act upon it before we get the grant for Island View Park and put that kind of money into it and then go, still got to have a cemetery. And I just thought we had that. We don't have the $2 million. We only had one and they were matching. But we could maybe get a matching. And like I said, Bountiful may come in because we could actually put an inlet into the park from Bountiful. So if they would work with us, because it would border Bountiful if we went all the way through that ground right there.
It's got a lot of ifs, but I think we're at a stage right now because we're asking, what are we doing with the Dix Market property? Now's the time to be asking those questions and reaching out and seeing who does want to participate and how badly do they want to. And I think that helps us for our citizens to feel like we've really made a good faith effort to give them what they say that they want. I think it's worth
I've
our work
had
session.
minimum 6-8 people ask why we don't expand the cemetery in Island View Park. Just, general conversation.
I think it's got merit because it keeps us off the hillside for potential cemetery property acquisition costs. I mean, it's not free to do an expansion, but I would be interested to know. I would think we'd probably put the problem 20, 30 years down the road if we could turn that all into cemetery space. So I think it has the potential of solving a couple of issues. I think it's pretty novel. I'd like to explore it.
Certainly the Planning Commission would cheer you for that.
Well, and that was when I watched them, I thought, that's what they want, and I thought this.
They don't have any way to pay for it, but it's what they want.
Yeah.
Right, they have no way to pay for it, and that's why I was trying to look at all these options that maybe we could bring into.
And if you're willing to consider allowing different uses on the Dix Market, then it becomes more feasible. You do a trade-off. Hey, got a nice park, but I'm going to have to put
Sure, I mean, that would have to be part of the discussion.
Townhomes along with single-family homes or something like that.
And that may be, and it may be that they can do single-family homes if they've got a park. I mean, you look how much more valuable the Smoot Farms or Smoot Park homes are there because they're backing up to a park and you've got a park right there. So it's going to up the value of those homes enough that maybe that might work.
I'm not opposed to having a discussion. That the issue is how to come up with reasonable cost estimates, and that was going to rely on some work from staff. I think you're going to find that this is
Can't do it for a while.
Yeah, I think you're going to find this is a challenge. Are you willing to spend any money on this? On looking at this, hiring a consultant, for example, you could have the same guy, Dan, who did his firm worked on Island View Park. His firm has some experience building or cost estimating parks. If you're willing, I don't know how much it would cost. We could ask him, how much would it cost for you to do some cost estimates for a park? Now, we got
Probably have to charge by the hour.
just charge by
The
the
part
hour.
I'd be interested initially before going out to say redesign a park would be is if you were to take the whole of Island View, I'm just going to go for the whole thing, not necessarily a pocket park initially, and that I'm just saying, if you took the whole parcel and said, if this converted into cemetery spaces, what is your potential total burials that you could have there, and then what is the recoupable given our current rates? What would that look like? Because not saying we'll have a land rush, but there are a number of people who would probably immediately out of the gate want to go ahead and secure spots. So I'm not sure if it's going to bootstrap itself.
And you can spread that cost out over time. You can
certainly can. I mean, it's
the lower level for the first 5 years, and then do another 5 years on the next level, and another 15 on the top level.
But having no overlay, I can't say this is X number of spaces. That would be interesting before engaging, at least for me, before engaging additional efforts on a
And that's
project.
why I thought maybe a work session, so we worked some of that out. And maybe we need to contact the church and contact Bountiful City and find out if we really do have people that are willing to
Does
to
it
go
make
into
sense
on
to
it.
have the
This-
work session to make the list of questions that need to be asked, or to have some of those questions answered before a work
Before we
session?
spend
It's
any
probably one, both.
A little of both.
Yeah,
The
spitball
other
feasibility on pricing. and
The
then
other thing
the
to
rest.
remember is it isn't just a matter of paying back the grant money that we got for Island View, but replacing the
Same
acreage.
That's
Right,
why
that
we
was the point
figured
with
that
the
was the
Dixie
point.
Market.
By putting this other park in, that's what we're doing, is replacing the
Well, the
acreage.
reason I bring that up is when, just for fun, or just throwing out, taking all of Island View as an idea, that's a pretty big park, and Centerville's low on space, and it has a high value.
Sure,
Take
sure.
the whole Dick's Market.
Yeah.
All 6 acres, right? I don't know how big is Island View Park.
What's the requirement? When do you have to replace the acreage?
Remember?
I don't remember
I don't remember.
It wouldn't be anywhere near, I mean, I think Dick's Market's like 12 acres.
6 acres.
So 6?
Is what they're proposing. They don't have the last 3 under control.
Well, perhaps if you do it that way, you relieve the density issue on the other side of town. No, I'm not joking. I'm serious. If part of it is having a reasonable green space in a congested area.
Right, I just would love to see some math on all this.
That's why I want to see what's
Math.
the total parcel value
Math
we
is
could
the
get from
problem.
a cemetery.
I mean, ideas are fun, but before we even start having the conversation, I just think we should have at least some rough, like, it
Right,
sounds
that's-
like you've thought through this way more than I have, because this is, new to me, but at least a rough, like, math, like, really, really rough general math, like, these are the ideas of what the swaps would be acreage-wise, and what the cost would be, and who we'd have to be working with, and these are big questions.
Well, that's why
That's
I'm
the
asking
purpose of a
for
work session. Yeah.
Just some very preliminary
throw some
numbers
things
that
out.
not sign. Don't bring in a city engineer for this, but yeah.
And I think Bruce Cox had looked into the restrictions on the park property for the planning commission, so Corey might have that information.
So Steve, is it feasible to tackle this before September?
Well, not before middle of August anyway, so yeah, I think
This can wait until after the
September,
budget's done.
yeah, if you can wait till September,
So if you start on this in mid-August, and we can have a work session in September.
yeah.
Or even if we came up with the
I think it's
full
worth
list of
exploring.
questions
Yeah.
in advance and, mid-August, that would
I'd
be
say
fine.
keep the concept open. You may have to have smaller acreage at
Oh,
the
yeah.
Dick's Market and supplement that maybe with maybe we can get by with a nature park
Mhm.
above Island View
Right.
that also counts as acreage.
Yeah, that's what I said. I
Sure.
think there's a lot of options that we can look at once we get, prices. At 2 in the morning, I can only think of so much.
Okay.
And poor Stephanie can only,
I think it's a tremendous thought.
And it may not work out, but it's worth putting a little bit of effort in.
Any other miscellaneous business? Then I would look for a motion to go into closed meeting for discuss character and competence.
In
Are we
miscellaneous
coming back
business,
out?
did we want to say anything about the map,
The map.
the visual that the county showed us, so that they can move forward? Lisa, do we need to say anything about that?
I don't think it requires formal action.
Well, it doesn't require formal action, but if you can let staff know if you have any concerns, and this week we'll get it to Kevin and Randy to take a look at as well.
I would also note that we had a resignation of a Parks and Rec Committee member, so I'm looking for someone to fill the remainder of that term. Melissa Smith resigned.
How long is the remainder of the term?
I don't know.
Served for quite some time.
I think she was in her, I don't.
Maybe last year of a 3-year term.
Oh, I can tell you.
I might have made for it.
So are we
Motion
coming
to
back
go
to
to, no need to come back to a city council meeting. So we can adjourn to a closed session. We won't come back to discuss personnel issues, character and competence.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Aye.
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 Sorry, George.
And build it.
Either one.
We're very efficient.
All
I just
right,
wanna
thank
make
you
sure
very
we're
much.
not-
We'll go into closed session.
I don't think we'd take the whole.
She was reappointed last year.
Looks like it's, she says
You've
it's
got
$1 million.
Two more years.
2+ years.
You can get
A
like
little more